All right, so we're diving deep today
Yeah, we are.
into Emily Henry's funny story.
Funny story.
You guys sent this one in, and we're going to really get into some of the interesting parts and maybe what it might mean for you.
Yeah, I think with this book, I think it's it's a rom-com. It's definitely light and fun, but I also think there's a lot in there that really makes you think about relationships and how we navigate these unexpected changes in our lives.
Okay, so to get you oriented,
Hmm.
the central character, Daphne,
Mm.
she thinks she's got it all figured out. She's got this fiance, Peter,
Right.
and he drops a bomb on her
He does.
that he's in love with his best friend, Petra, and he's calling off the engagement.
What a way to start a book.
I
You
know.
think you're settled and everything's going fine, and then boom.
Yeah, and it's not just a broken engagement. It's like she had this whole future mapped out with him.
Yeah, you get the sense that she had really invested in this vision of their future together. They'd moved in together really quickly. They had their social lives completely intertwined, and they were already making these big plans, travel to Japan and Dubai, even retirement plans, monthly family dinners.
Yeah.
And it really highlights, I think, for us how deeply we can invest in a vision of the future and how disorienting it can be when that vision is suddenly shattered.
Absolutely. And I think for her, it was even more jarring because it wasn't just that it was over, it was that she had been replaced,
Right. Yeah.
and so quickly. And it was almost like she was an afterthought.
And the speed of it all,
Yeah.
right? Like barely a month and they're already engaged. I mean, that really just twists the knife, doesn't it?
And, the book even talks about how, she's hyperventilating at the
Yeah,
thought of
yeah.
that. And so you can feel that.
Really captures, I think, that intensity of the initial feelings of betrayal and just trying to reconcile what you thought was your reality with what is now your present.
Yes. And then in a very unexpected turn, she ends up becoming roommates with Miles,
Right.
who, we find out is Petra's
Ex-boyfriend.
ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
So you've got this very interesting situation where you have two people who have both been hurt by the same couple,
Yeah.
and they're now sharing a living space.
Yeah. I mean, the awkward potential, right?
Oh, my God.
Two people both nursing broken hearts from the same source. Now they have to navigate sharing a bathroom and, coordinating grocery shopping.
And there's that point early on where she even thinks to herself, you know, 91 days until I can leave.
Yeah.
So,
Imagine that feeling
But, no,
of just being in limbo, counting down the moments until you can escape.
yeah. Have you ever felt that way? Like you just want to fast forward through a time.
Oh, absolutely. I think we all have those moments where we're just like, get me out of this situation.
Yeah,
But sometimes those uncomfortable situations, they lead to the most unexpected connections.
that's right. And I think that's really what this story is about. It's not just about, romantic heartbreak. It's about how these two individuals are trying to cope
Yeah.
with this being blindsided. And in the process, they form a connection that neither one of them could have ever anticipated.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this so compelling, right?
Yeah,
It's
that-
not your typical rom-com setup. It's something a little bit more nuanced, I think ultimately more relatable.
So we're going to unpack how they navigate this new reality, how their relationship evolves, and point out some of the moments that are both, laugh out loud funny and surprisingly moving.
Yeah, so let's start with Daphne's initial experience. How does she react to Peter's news? And what does the book tell us about how she's starting to process this huge shift in her life?
I mean, I think the first thing you see is just shock and disbelief.
Yeah.
And of course, hurt. She's losing not just a partner, she's losing this whole future she thought she had.
Yeah.
And I think it's even, more painful for her when she realizes how quickly Peter has moved on.
Right.
They were supposed to have this 2-year engagement. And then, barely a month later, he's engaged to someone else.
And I think for Daphne, it's not just about losing Peter. It's about this feeling of being so easily replaced, and the speed at which it happened probably amplifies her feelings of inadequacy and confusion.
Yeah. And she had really integrated her life into his,
Right.
this waning bay house. And the book even mentions that she had, minimal possessions before she moved in.
Which is interesting, right? It shows
Yeah.
how fully she had committed to this shared life, and now she's almost starting over.
Right.
So I think for a lot of us, that might resonate, that feeling of, have you ever felt like you merged your life with someone else's and then had to kind of disentangle yourself?
Yes, definitely. And in the midst of all this chaos, she still has her work.
Right.
She's a librarian. And specifically, she does this story hour.
Yeah, and I think the story hour becomes this really important element in the book
Right.
because it provides Daphne with these moments of joy and connection, even while her personal life is in a shambles.
Right.
You know, we think about little Aram in his Spider-Man costume and his mom Huma.
Yes.
These are consistent positive interactions that I think offer a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos.
And, for our listeners, that might be something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are those things in your life that
Yeah.
are kind of those little routines or pleasures that can help you through?
Those anchors,
Yes.
those little things that just bring us a little bit of joy even when things are tough.
Yes. And let's not forget about her feelings about Petra.
Oh, yeah, right from the start.
Yeah, I don't like Petra even one tiny bit.
Yeah, I love that line.
That's a good one.
I think it's something that we can all relate to
Right.
when we feel wronged in a relationship.
Yes.
You know, that immediate visceral dislike, it's a natural human response.
So how does this shared experience of being dumped by Peter and Petra lead to a connection between Daphne and Miles?
Well, it starts with commiseration
Yeah.
and often fueled by alcohol.
Yes.
There's that great scene early on where they bond over rum and wine after they find out how quickly Peter and Petra are planning to get married. It's just raw and honest, this
Wow.
shared vulnerability that I think unexpectedly creates this kind of intimacy between them.
Yeah. Have you ever found yourself connecting with someone in that way
Oh, absolutely.
over a shared misfortune?
Especially over a shared misfortune, I think it creates this instant sense of understanding and empathy.
Yes. And then, of course, comes the fake dating.
Oh, the classic fake dating trope.
I know, right?
But what I think is interesting is how often those manufactured situations can lead to genuine feelings.
Right.
You know, it forces people to interact in a different way, to see each other in a new light.
So Daphne tells Peter that she's dating Miles
Yeah, on the phone.
on the phone.
Like without even
Oh, you talking.
talking to Miles about it.
And Miles is so surprised.
Yeah, he's amused, but then they decide to go along with it, right?
Yeah. Especially with this wedding looming,
Unforgettable.
Peter and Petra's wedding.
They have to put on a united front.
Right. And it's so funny because you start to see these little moments where their differences and their dynamic is really coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Daphne's friend Ashley,
Ashley with her FBI theories.
yes, she
Yeah.
thinks that Daphne is in witness protection.
Oh, it's brilliant.
And then Daphne thinking that Miles is a delivery guy.
I know, even though he's worked at the winery for 7 years.
So you can see that there are these assumptions that they've made about each other.
Based on very little information.
Yes, and I think that that's one of the charming things about this book,
Yeah.
is that it shows you how easily we can misjudge people.
Absolutely. First impressions can be so deceiving.
Yeah, and then that winery outing is a really pivotal moment
Yes.
for them.
Just start of the performance.
Yes. Ashley is so surprised to see them together. And Miles introduces Daphne as his adoring girlfriend.
Yeah. With a wink.
Yes. It's like they're starting to, kind of play these roles.
Yeah, testing the waters.
Yes.
Seeing how it feels.
And then you've got these moments where they start to really connect. Like going to Big Louie's Drive-In and trying those Petoskey fries.
Oh, yeah, those Petoskey fries. They sound amazing.
I know.
I think food is such a powerful way to connect.
Yeah.
You know, those shared meals, those little discoveries, they create these shared memories and inside jokes.
Have you ever bonded with someone over something like that?
Oh, many times.
Yes.
It's amazing how something as simple as a shared meal can really bring people together.
Yes. And then they have this nighttime visit to the beach.
Yeah, the bonfire scene.
The bonfire scene.
It's so beautifully written.
I know.
It's quiet and vulnerable, and you can just feel that connection deepening.
Yes. And you could see their living situation evolving, too.
Yeah, Miles stops blasting his sad music.
Right, the Jamie O'Neill.
The mournful Jamie O'Neill.
Yes. They fall into this comfortable routine.
It's a sign that they're both starting to heal.
Yes. And what do you make of, Miles's support of Daphne early on, like not charging her rent and things like that?
I think it speaks volumes about his character,
Yeah.
offering his jacket at the beach, offering to show her around Waning Bay. It's not just about being a helpful roommate.
Right.
It's about genuine care and empathy for her well-being.
Yes. And Daphne starts to recognize it. And she even has this moment where she talks about this candlelizing of awareness that she feels after, they have this close moment on the couch.
Like couch.
And it's almost like her body is betraying her.
Yeah, that physical reaction is a sign that her feelings are shifting.
Yeah. And then they decide to have this summer of Sundays.
I love that.
And it's so great.
A summer of Sundays exploring Waning Bay. It's such a charming idea.
Yes.
And I think it's symbolic of their willingness to invest in each other,
Yeah.
to create new memories together.
So let's talk about some of the other relationships in Daphne's life, because I think they play a big role in her journey as well.
Absolutely. I think it's important to remember that, personal growth doesn't happen in isolation.
Right.
It's influenced by the people around us.
So what about her relationship with her mother? What does that tell us?
Well, we see glimpses of their dynamic through phone calls and anecdotes, like the story of the floppy-brimmed hat.
Oh, yeah.
I loved that.
Yes.
It's such a funny little detail.
And it shows that she has this affectionate, but, maybe sometimes a little overbearing relationship.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah.
Those parental figures who mean well, but sometimes don't quite get it right.
And as the story goes on, you see Daphne starting to realize that her mother has a full life of her own.
Yes.
She's doing CrossFit, she's taking art classes.
She's got her own friends.
Yeah, and it's a really important realization for Daphne because she's starting to see her mother as this individual.
Right, not just her caretaker.
And then we have Miles's sister, Julia.
Oh, Julia.
And what does her presence add to the story?
Well, I think Julia brings this interesting external perspective on Daphne and Miles' situation. She's very perceptive, and she picks up on the dynamic between them maybe even before they do.
Yeah.
So she adds this layer of realism, I think, to their evolving relationship.
Okay, and then there's Daphne's friend, Ashley.
Ashley the librarian.
Yes, she's so quirky.
She's a force of nature.
Yes.
But despite her, tendency to be late in her wild theories, she's a genuinely supportive and hilarious friend to Daphne.
Yes, and even that surprise birthday party.
Oh, the disastrous surprise party.
Which,
Which Daphne initially tries to get out of,
yeah.
but shows their connection, It's a reminder that friendships can be messy and unpredictable.
And then there's that poker night.
Oh, yeah, the poker night.
With Ashley and her friends.
What a scene.
I know. What do you think is the significance of that for Daphne?
Well, I think it's where she really starts to feel this sense of belonging in Waning Bay. That isn't tied to her past relationship with Peter.
Right.
She's building her own community.
Yes.
Finding her place. And I think that's a really crucial step in moving on.
Yeah, it's about creating a new anchor for herself.
Yeah, exactly.
And, as Daphne and Miles are getting closer, they have to deal with their pasts.
Right. The past has a way of creeping back in, doesn't it?
Yes. And so Peter starts calling Daphne again.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think she handles these attempts to reconnect?
Well, I think initially she's curious, maybe even a little bit attached. But as her connection with Miles deepens, her reactions to Peter's calls begin to change. When she lies about having a +1 for the wedding, that's a huge turning point.
Yes.
Peter can't believe she's with Miles.
Right. It's like he underestimated her.
I think he did.
And Miles has his own past to deal with,
Yeah.
particularly his feelings for Petra.
Yeah, there's that moment where he refers to her as the love of his life.
And it really reveals the depth of his heartbreak.
Yeah, he carries guilt about their breakup as well. It's a reminder, I think, that healing from heartbreak isn't always linear.
No, it's not. And then there's that really awkward encounter.
Oh, at Cherry Hill Farms.
Yes.
Where Miles works.
Yes, it's like the past is intruding on their present.
It really is.
And then to make things even more complicated,
Yeah.
Daphne's father and his new girlfriend, Starfire, show up.
Oh, Starfire.
What do you make of that character?
She's a lot, isn't she?
Yeah, the senior photo incident and her calling Daphne Daffy. It's just so awkward.
It pushes all of Daphne's buttons.
Yes. And then they spontaneously decide to take this trip to Mackinac.
Leaving Daphne behind.
Yeah, and I think that really hurts Daphne.
It feels like a familiar pattern, right?
Yes, of her father prioritizing other people over her.
Yeah.
But this time she confronts him.
She does.
She says that she needs respect.
And clear communication.
Yes, and it's a big step for her.
It is.
In terms of setting those boundaries.
I think a lot of people listening can relate to that.
Yeah.
The struggle to assert your needs in a family dynamic.
Yeah, and then you've got this senior prom event.
Oh, the prom.
I know.
What a scene.
Why is that such a pivotal moment for Daphne and Miles?
Well, Peter and Petra show up unexpectedly.
Of course they do.
Of course they do. And it forces Daphne and Miles to confront their past in a very public way.
Yeah.
But they choose to stay.
Right.
Instead of running away. And I think that speaks volumes about the strength of their bond.
And then Peter makes this really insensitive comment, and Daphne runs out, and Miles follows her.
Yeah. And they have this incredibly vulnerable conversation.
Miles opens up about his family and his past with his sister.
Yeah, and I think that moment of sharing is so crucial for their relationship. It allows them to connect on a deeper level.
Well, and Julia moves back in temporarily.
Right.
And you see Miles being so supportive.
Yeah, he really steps up.
And then, of course, Pierre comes back and tries to win Daphne back.
One last grand gesture.
I know. So what happens?
Daphne rejects him.
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful moment because it shows how much she's grown. She's not just reacting anymore. She's choosing what she wants.
Yes. And then Miles finally confesses his feelings.
He does, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. He's finally letting himself be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And Daphne realizes she loves him.
And they decide to start this unexpected future together.
Yes. And the story ends with this housewarming party.
At Miles's apartment.
Yes. And he has redecorated.
Which is symbolic, right?
Yeah.
He's shedding the past and embracing this new chapter with Daphne.
So we've seen them go through this really messy breakup and forge this unexpected connection and ultimately find a new path forward.
Yeah, I think it's a story about resilience and the power of human connection.
And found family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, the connections that we make that sustain us through difficult times.
So for you listening, think about those unexpected turns in your own life.
Yeah.
What events that might have felt disruptive
Right.
actually led you to surprising and valuable connections or a stronger sense of yourself?
I think we all have those funny stories, you know,
Yeah.
those moments that shape who we are. And maybe your funny story is still being written.
That's right.
You never know what's around the corner.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us
It was a pleasure.
on this deep dive into Funny Story.
Yeah, a really fun one.
It was, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.